streaming on Hulu.
It's a serial killer case.
He's the Dahmer you've never heard of.
I definitely felt the presence of evil.
But did he act alone? Now, finally,
not many people live to tell about their involvement with the serial killer.
the one man who helped break the case.
Never before a face-to-face interview with the camera.
Why now?
Let me ask you, what do you think? Am I the evil culprit, the accomplice? I'd like to know how the audience views me.
The Fox Hollow Murders, Playground of a Serial Killer, now streaming on Hulu.
This cold and flu season, Instacart is here to help deliver all of your sick day essentials. Whether you're in prevention mode and need vitamins, hand sanitizer, and that lemon tea your Nana swears by, or you're in healing mode and need medicine, soup, and a lot more tissues. Simply download the Instacart app to get sick day supplies that reinvigorate or relieve delivered in as fast as 30 minutes. Plus, enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Excludes restaurant orders. Service fees and terms apply.
You can support this podcast at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia.
I'm Rebecca Lavoie, and this is Crime Writers On. Crime Writers On is the original true crime review podcast that digs into true crime, pop culture, other podcasts. And on this episode, French authorities say a mild-mannered professor now living in Ottawa was behind a 1980 bombing of a synagogue. But Canadian officials aren't so sure. We'll talk about the podcast, The Copernic Affair from Canadaland. Joining me to get that done and more is true crime author, TV journalist, and host of the These Are Their Stories podcast, my husband and love of my life, Kevin Flynn. Hi, Kevin.
Hello, Rebecca.
Kevin, I just want to tell you, I've gotten so many incoming Instagram messages about how much people love These Are Their Stories.
Really?
For real. I'll show you them later. People love that show.
You know, because they're sending them to you and not to me, the host, makes me feel like this is bullshit.
Well, maybe it's because you keep your social media so on lock and I do not, as we discussed on the after show last week. Just saying. Also with us is private investigator, certified pet detective, resident cat lady, and author of the Piper Green series of cozy mysteries, Laura Bricker. Hi, Laura.
Hey, Rebecca.
And finally, our resident Doubting Thomas, the author of the City Trilogy of novels, host of Rip Current, Strange Arrivals, and our Patreon Deep Dive Book Club podcast host, Toby Ball. Hi, Toby.
Hey, Rebecca.
So, Kevin, this is Thursday's program. What's coming up on Monday's show?
On Monday, we're going to talk about the new series American Murder, Gabby Petito on Netflix.
All right, before we start that, Laura, I've got a question for you. You recently began writing for the newspaper again. What's going on?
Well, yeah, I decided I wanted to do a little human interest writing. I hadn't done any sort of creative writing in a while. I don't really have time right now to write books because I'm super busy doing PI work. And I wanted to kind of do some creative writing again. So I'm doing some feature writing for the New Hampshire Union Leader, which is our statewide newspaper. And it's great because I can write about anything around the state. I'm not limited to like one area. So send me your stories.
Yeah. So, Laura, I think that if you publish a really interesting story, you should share it in our Facebook group so that you can get the clicks and they'll hire you more. What do you think?
Okay, well, I will do that because somebody wrote a letter to the editor about my first story that I wrote for them because they were so excited about it.
Oh, it wasn't bad? It wasn't like a nasty one like we get at NHPR?
No, it was like Laura Bricker's article brought back so many fond memories of my childhood. Thank you. And I was like, that's me. I'm nostalgic and folksy.
We get emails at NHPR like, that reporter would be so much better if only they spoke with a more mature voice. Anyway, so Kevin,
yes.
I guess we should talk about the thing we're talking about on this episode, shan't we?
Yeah, you don't need my permission.
Oh, I don't? I'm not your
you don't have my featherwood like in the Aryan Brotherhood like we talked about on Monday.
But you're my old man.
That's true. That's true. None of the respect, though.
No, and none of the nostalgia.
None of the nostalgia. All right.
All right, let's get that done. Leading off.
Parts of the ceiling crumbled. Pieces of the wall were blown off. Dust and debris everywhere.
Et il y avait un rideau de flammes qui séparait la synagogue de la rue.
He remembers seeing a curtain of flames rising between the synagogue and the street. And outside, there was chaos.
In October 1980, a motorcycle packed with explosives went off outside a Paris synagogue, killing 4 and wounding nearly 4 dozen others. French investigators gathered evidence the attack was planned by a Palestinian militant group, but the trail for the bomber went cold for years.
Yusuf El-Khalil told French authorities that he was close to the PFLP in the 1980s, so the police officers took note of the names in his address book. One of the names on that list was Hassan Diab.
28 years after the attack on Rue Copernic, French authorities accused a Canadian sociology professor of Lebanese descent of planting the bomb. Hassan Diab proclaimed his innocence, saying their evidence was flawed and circumstantial. It spawned a diplomatic crisis as Canadian judicial authorities also questioned whether Diab should be turned over to France for trial.
It began to hit me like a dull anvil. For me, it came to a point where I just couldn't believe that people didn't understand that this was not the guy.
The Copernic Affair from Canadaland and House of Many Windows re-examines the controversial terrorism probe. Hosts Dana Ballout and Alex Atack talk to victims, investigators, and Diab himself to make sense of how an unassuming academic with a common name was accused of a horrific crime 4 decades ago. Is Hassan Diab guilty of an unspeakable act of political violence, or is he a scapegoat for a failed investigation? Spoiler alert, we're going to be talking about plot points from the Copernic Affair. So if you want to remain spoiler-free, go to the estimated time code in our show notes for our thumbs up or thumbs down reviews. So, Laura, one of the things that's interesting about the attack on the synagogue is that they don't immediately have like a letter saying this is who did it, right?
Yeah, I thought that was an interesting lead-in to this, because a lot of times now we see something on the news and there's like a bombing or there's an attack or whatever it is. Within a couple days, they're like, ISIS is taking responsibility, or like this person is taking responsibility for the attack. So this bomb explodes, 4 people die, 46 people are hurt, and it's the first targeted attack on the Jewish community. This is like 45 years ago. And it's just unusual for something like a terrorist attack that somebody doesn't claim responsibility for that. So I thought right away that was sort of like, I'm like, okay, that's going to be an interesting part of this story, particularly when we get to the person that they believe is responsible.
Right. So, Toby, I was listening to this podcast and I was thinking all throughout, like, accusing someone of terrorism is a big swing, right? And we hear of people in the podcast who like support him and then people who sort of like are quiet about their support later because, what if they're wrong that he didn't do it, right? But also the podcast does center this guy accused of this bombing. So what do you think about the way it begins talking about a victim of the bombing?
Yeah, so it starts with a son of one of the victims talking about his mom.
My mother told my brother that she will just go to the fruit store on Copernic Street to bring some figs, and that she will meet my brother in a few minutes. But this was the last time my brother saw her.
It was a good way to start, just in terms of you spend so much time on the like did he or didn't he thing that I think it could be easy to lose track of the actual tragedy of the event and why people were so intent on solving this case. So, yeah, I mean, because the rest of it feels to me like a long form newspaper article in general, but this has sort of a little bit of emotional resonance and something to keep in mind as you go through and be like, okay, yeah, like these are actually sort of the stakes for people in France or for the judge, et cetera.
One of the things that I thought was a missed opportunity at the beginning of this podcast was kind of a broader discussion around the rising anti-immigration sentiment and anti-Semitism in Europe now. Like listening to this view of France, like when this attack happened in 1980, there was sort of this long discussion about how anti-Semitism was really fringe, right? And it's obviously not anymore, nor is racism, nor is anti-immigration stuff, the rise of alt-right and Nazism and so forth. I mean, they're back in a big way. So I kind of thought that was a missed opportunity, but they did try to set up the context for how, I want to say, unusual or at least reviled the anti-Semitic stuff was in France at the time, because this reporter...
You mean the public, the anti-Semitic, like you were saying, anti-Semitism has been around pretty strong all the time.
But now it's like real back,
you mean out in the open is what you're getting.
And they sort of set up how much in the closet it was by sending this reporter in, or recounting the story of how this reporter went in to infiltrate this neo-Nazi meeting. Kevin, what do you think about that scene?
Oh, that was great. I mean, it was, I guess, a red herring, but what a great thing to include in the first episode here was about this, French journalist, and she went to, I guess, a neo-Nazi group or white power group, and the fact that they're just kind of like, I don't want to say shooting the shit, but
they're having their meeting.
They're having their meeting, and they're so open about, we should do this, and like, screw,
She expected these men might be a little more measured in their words with an outsider being in the room. Instead, she found the opposite. They were comfortable around her.
For 2 hours, they talked about against the Jews, I mean, this was real Nazism. in 1980 in Paris.
They're certainly not so self-aware that they immediately ask her about herself, but they eventually get around to asking her name and realize that she has a Jewish surname and like, I don't know. Were they like all of a sudden like, we're taking that back?
Yeah.
I don't know.
We were kidding.
And the only reason it sort of means anything is that within a very short span of time, there was this attack targeting Jews. And so who are the obvious suspects? When you just had that experience, you just ran this expose, and they eventually come around and take credit, then you've got to say, oh, well, we need to look closer at the Nazis. But at least in this journalist's opinion is that they were so disorganized and kind of like fools. Dumb, that there's a whole level of sophistication to this particular attack that she found it very unlikely that they'd be involved. And plus other evidence pushed it towards these Palestinian militants.
I really miss the days when the existence of a hate group operating in a city would have made a front page news expose. Like, I really do miss those days. I mean, it feels very nostalgic to me. So, Laura, let's talk about this investigation a little bit. We meet Hassan Diab. We'll talk about him a little more, but he seems sort of like a bumbling professorial type.
Yeah.
But sort of the lead up to his arrest is kind of wild, right?
Which part? The part that like he's just out and this reporter comes up to him in like 2007 and is like, oh, hey, do you know you're a suspect in this terrorist attack? And he's just like, what? And then a year later, they show up with this like dramatic SWAT team arrest. You know, they come to his door. He's getting his coffee and they're like screaming, yelling. It's like something you see in like a TV show. Take him out, cuff him. And he's like, what the heck is going on here? And it goes from that in 2008 for something that happened in 1980.
Yeah.
And here we are in 2024.
2025.
Oh, I'm sorry. It's 2025.
Yeah.
I don't know what year it is anymore. 2025, still talking about this. Like, what would you think if somebody came up to you on the street and was like, hey, Rebecca, do you know you were like a suspect in this thing? And you'd be like, yeah, whatever. And then you don't hear anything. So you're like, that was bogus.
Weird.
And then, nope. Oh, here comes the SWAT team to haul me away. Like, what the fuck?
Yeah. One thing that I would probably do if I found myself in that situation was spend some time thinking about how I wanted to present myself to the public and to reporters in case this ever happens again. And Toby, we do get this interview with Hassan Diab where they go to his house, and it's actually kind of a funny scene because his current wife is not interested in speaking with them. And then he brings them back to this like weird little room where they do the interview, but then they describe how he just like rambles and is kind of all over the place. But he does say some things that maybe you could imagine how an investigator who believes he's the one might not dissuade them of that idea, right?
Yeah, well, when I listened to him, I was like, oh boy, this guy's not doing himself any favors. He's just like, he's too smooth. His answers are too perfect. You know, it's like, in Lebanon, were you part of any of these militant groups? Oh, no, I was the guy who everybody envied because I could get along with all the groups. You know, I wasn't in any group. I was in all of them.
Maybe if they consider me a fighter at the time, I would be with all the groups at the same time.
So the most correct answer is you had friends from all groups, but you're saying that you didn't belong to any one group in particular.
Yeah, correct. Yeah.
All right. Because sometimes, Hassan, it's hard to get you to answer yes or no.
It seems so evasive.
And then it's like, you know, your passport was found and, well, I lost it. I was going to class and I had it in my leather pouch and I lost my pouch. And next thing I know, it just kind of felt like everything was, I don't know if rehearsed is the right word, but it seems like exactly the kind of thing I would expect somebody who had months to prepare his answers for if he was actually guilty, the kind of stuff he would come up with where it'd be like kind of vague enough that it's hard to really track down something to prove that you're lying, but at the same time, just like kind of stops any material suspicion in its tracks. Like, it's just kind of hard to pin down. And we're getting like 3 minutes, and they were there for 8 hours. And they walk out and they're like, oh my God, this guy just tells story after story after story after story.
He won't shut up.
Never answers any questions. He just tells stories. So, I mean, it's not surprising to me that if you thought that he was guilty and you listen to him and it seems like he's filibustering, and then when he's actually trying to answer your questions, it's like this kind of nebulous, like stuff that is just kind of non-specific answers that you can't really check up on. Yeah, I would be like, there's nothing that this guy has said that makes me reconsider my opinion.
I mean, there were a couple times too where the reporters like had to, that's not a yes or no, or like, but are you saying that like he wasn't direct in a way that he very easily could be? And some of the things are like, well, you know, at the time you could be this or that. You know, it's the middle of a civil war. And it's supposed to be like, well, you don't understand the culture of 1950s Beirut, and so, well, I guess I got to take your word on it. I mean, I think in the end, for me, it seemed like there's more evidence pointing away from him than to him, and everybody gets to kind of take a side on that. But I also was not reassured by the interview that I heard, because you're a smart guy, and you're not doing yourself any favors by not answering some of these questions, if not in a more direct way, in a more reassuring way, to say that I'm not the guy.
But you will be doing yourself a favor if you join us on Patreon.
Holy shit, Rebecca Lavoie.
I just stole that from you. We are in the business section, Kevin.
You absolutely did do that. Nicely done.
Thank you. I was listening to see what you were saying, and I was thinking about how I would transition, and then I just pulled the trigger.
I know there are so many people who listen and they start to get a little anxious around the 17-minute mark when I'm talking.
Nervous.
Yeah, like, how's he going to do it? How's he going to do it? Join us on Patreon at patreon.com/Partners in Crime Media. What you can do is sign up and get all sorts of exclusive podcasts. If you join us at the leading off level, you can get great podcasts like the Crime Writers On After Show, Laura's Leave It to Bricker podcast, Rebecca's Karen Reed case updates in the readathon, and our advice and lifestyle podcast where Rebecca and I dish it out in Married with Podcast. In the latest episode, Rebecca and I get very personal talking about our medical weight loss journeys. And this is something that we got a lot of interest in. And actually, if you're not with us on Patreon, you actually can purchase this individual episode.
Really?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah, it's a big seller.
Yeah.
No, it isn't. If you join us at the Let's Do What We Do level, you can get all of our episodes of Crime Writers On early and ad-free. And if you are a deep diver, you can watch Toby Ball and his guests record his podcast, Toby Ball's Deep Dive Book Club podcast. Toby will be streaming live on February 25th to talk about the new book. And what is that?
Murder in the Bayou by Ethan Brown.
We also have an Amazon storefront where you can see some of our favorite things.
Yep.
Rebecca, tell us about this week's Amazon recommendations. Might it be a little teapot?
No.
What? We talked about it on Monday.
But that's already on our Amazon
all right,
list.
all right.
Kevin, do you know what fatwood is?
Fatwood? Is that like a featherwood from the Aryan Nation?
It's like those fire starters that smell piney. They're sticks.
Yeah. So not a Duraflame or something.
No, if you buy those in the store, though, you can get like a little bag of them, about a pound bag for like $10. Mm-hmm. On Amazon, you can buy a 10-pound box for $21. So I order all of my fatwood fire starters. A couple years ago, I bought a 25-pound box. It was pretty exciting, but it was just kind of hard to store.
For somebody who does the ornamental fire in the fireplace,
every day. Every day.
That box lasted a long time.
It did, because it was 25 pounds. But yeah, you can buy fatwood on Amazon in bulk. And it's cheap, so that's where I buy mine, at Amazon.
And Toby, what are your listener-inspired Toby Ball's deep cut recommendations?
I'm actually thinking about purchasing this one myself.
Oh.
It's a book. It's The Gentle Art of Swedish Death Cleaning. How to Free Yourself and Your Family from a Lifetime of Clutter.
Whoa.
And then in parentheses, it says The Swedish Art of Living and Dying series, which sounds a little serious, but I could definitely use some decluttering advice, not from Maria Kondo.
Is death cleaning, is that like some kind of feng shui
I think it's
kind of
cleaning,
thing?
so if you die, there's not a lot of shit in your house.
Yeah, I don't know.
Maybe. I just made that up, but it sounds right.
Yeah, I think it's one of the
I'm going
others,
with Rebecca on that. That sounds better than anything I can make up.
By the way, don't hate on Marie Kondo. She taught us how to fold shit, and we still do it to this day.
I still fold my clothes like Marie Kondo.
Thirds, yeah.
I don't hate on Marie Kondo.
T-shirts, yeah. I mean, I have many more things than just that what sparks some joy or whatever, but she did teach me how to fold. That was very handy.
Mm-hmm.
Shout out to Marie Kondo. The other thing here is the hobbies, all in uppercase. So I think I'm supposed to say it loud. 8-pack giant chunky yarn for, and this is all one word, crocheting super, bulky, large, soft, fluffy yarn tie, dye plush, fuzzy yarn mixed, color, thick chenille, yarn for hand, KN.
Hand knitting.
Oh.
Ran out of characters.
It's hand knitting. It's when people, instead of using sticks, they use their hands. They can get those giant loopy blankets.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I thought maybe it was going to be like Newt Rockney or something.
Oh, yes.
Anyway.
It's a hand Newt Rockney. You're right.
Hand Newt Rockney puppets.
100%.
Yeah, so that's what I got for this week.
So the next time you're going on Amazon, take a quick look at us first before you get deep into it. It's amazon.com/shop/Crime Writers On. Hey, bookmark it. Why not?
That could become your Amazon homepage.
Be your Amazon homepage. You can check out our stuff and then do the shopping you're going to do anyway. We earn commissions on qualified purchases.
All right, Kevin, before we end the business section, really quick question for you.
Mm-hmm.
I hope you're prepared to answer it.
I'm ready.
Do we have any Patreon patron saints of the week this week?
Our Patreon patron saints are Hell Franz and Marianne Tatum. Bless you.
Hell, Marianne, you guys rule. Thank you so much for supporting us on Patreon. We're happy to bestow the title of Patreon Patron Saints on your beautiful little heads. And for those of you who follow us on Patreon, thank you so much. Your support means everything to us. It helps us continue this podcast. Because I'll tell you, we're not huge. We're kind of niche. And your support makes it happen. Right, Kevin?
We're selling fucking yarn to keep this going. So yeah.
All right, Kevin, does that end the business section?
Thus ends the business section.
I'm going to go ahead and fade that music out right now. All right, Kevin, let's finish up our discussion.
Yeah, because we got to make dinner.
We do?
Yeah, we almost never have time for dinner, and that's why HelloFresh is so fantastic.
Oh, HelloFresh.
So you can skip the grocery store and make cooking at home easy, fun, and affordable with HelloFresh, America's #1 meal kit. Of course, it's delivered right to your door. But what we like about it is that you don't have to take too much time to make it. Now, of course, they got all sorts of great recipes, like the pork sausage spaghetti bolognese.
Ooh, my
It's in
favorite.
their Hall of Fame. Very easy to make. You got a little extra time. You want to put that effort into the gingery coconut chicken soup.
So good.
Sometimes, though, you just got to get it done, right? Because you've been podcasting all day. So HelloFresh's prep and bake meals come together within 5 minutes of prep, while HelloFresh's 15-minute meals are done in just 3 simple steps.
Incredible.
So you can finish up what you're doing. You can put some great food on the table. Remember, all the time, though, you also save from, grocery shopping.
Oh, yeah, Kevin, there's so many great options here.
Get up to 10 free meals and a free high-protein item for life at HelloFresh.com/HelloFreshPodcast. 1 item per box with active subscription. Free meals applied as discount on first box. New subscribers only. Varies by plan. That's up to 10 free HelloFresh meals. Just go to HelloFresh.com/HelloFreshPodcast.
Now streaming on Hulu.
It's a serial killer case.
He's the dumber you've never heard of.
I definitely felt the presence of evil.
But did he act alone? Now, finally,
Not many people live to tell about their involvement with the serial killer.
the one man who helped break the case.
Never before a face-to-face interview with the camera.
Why now? Let me ask you, what do you think? Am I the evil culprit, the accomplice? I'd like to know how the audience views me.
The Fox Hollow Murders, playground of a serial killer. Now streaming on Hulu.
So, Kevin, who's our next sponsor?
Oh, we're brought to you by Quince.
Hell yeah.
Yeah, with the new year comes a new opportunity to reimagine ourselves and, more importantly, our wardrobes.
Incredible.
Refresh your look with quality pieces and stay on budget with Quince. You know what happens in January?
What?
We talk about all the things that we wanted for Christmas but never got, so we buy it for ourselves.
Yes.
That includes high-quality clothes, things that look good, feel good, and you can get that from Quince.
Kevin, I am a Quince fanatic.
You are.
I have multiple items in multiple colors of the same item from Quince. I love their cashmere sweaters.
They're cozy Mongolian cashmere sweaters.
Incredible sweaters at a great price.
Yeah, they're always priced 50 to 80% less than similar brands, and they're able to do that by partnering directly with top factories, cutting out the cost of the middleman. No middleman.
I love how they actually show you, Kevin. Mm-hmm. They actually show you what it would cost if you bought it somewhere else, from the same place. It's incredible. So upgrade your closet this year without that upgraded price tag. Go to quince.com/crime for 365-day returns plus free shipping on your order. That's QUINCE.com/crime to get free shipping and 365-day returns. Quince.com/crime. All right, so Laura, we talked about the weird timeline of Diab's arrest, but I really want to talk about, first of all, I don't know if I want to get accused of a crime in France or any of these European countries where they can just try you in absentia, is weird. Anyway, that being said, they do talk about some secret evidence that this judge guy dug up. How do you feel about being accused of something based on secret evidence?
I feel like the French justice system just does not feel like justice to me here. So there's secret evidence that led them to Hassan. And the judge knows this. The sources of this secret evidence are not revealed to the defense, the prosecutor, and they don't know what the secret evidence is. So how can you rebut something that you don't even know? And also, the secret evidence may have been gleaned by like torturing somebody that was a prisoner who was like, sure, I'll like reveal some information because I'm dying.
Which, being waterboarded.
Yeah, like isn't super credible in terms of how they obtained this secret evidence. So I just feel like that is so wrong to me. It gets my justice hackles up in a way that I was like, how can this be happening that you can use information like this? Like, think about, like, we talk about all the time, like Brady violations and reciprocal discovery and all this stuff so that you can actually respond to the information they're using to bring you down.
Yeah.
Right?
Welcome to Guantanamo.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I'm like, what the fuck's going on here?
Yeah. I mean, we also hear later that the handwriting sample, which they were basically hinging the whole case on, was bullshit.
Yeah.
That, and Toby, we also hear that he may not have even been in France at the time of the crime, right?
So this is the thing that I couldn't quite figure out why this didn't just put an end to everything, which is that he said he was in Lebanon, that he was taking this exam. They look, yeah, he took an exam. He did well on it. There were people there who were also taking the exam that saw him. I mean, it just seems like one of those alibis that's pretty airtight unless you're going to, like, I don't know what else they want, right? I mean, there's like a contemporaneous record of his being there, and there are witnesses who put him there. Unless they got the date wrong, like they did for what's her face's thing at University of Maryland, Baltimore County.
You're talking about Serial, right?
Correct.
Yes. Kathy, not Kathy. That Susan Simpson discovered that she was at class the night that she says that she watched Adnan and Jay have the conversation. That's a deep cut, Toby. Nice job.
Yeah. Well, you know, it's little Easter eggs.
So what were you saying, Toby?
I don't know.
All right.
It felt like the whole Lebanon thing. That to me seemed like it ought to put an end to it. And maybe there's something they didn't include in the podcast where people, for some reason, weren't trusting that evidence. But it seemed pretty definitive to me.
You know what was definitive to me? Was that he had a bunch of women singing in harmony about his innocence outside of his hearing. Kevin, didn't it strike you that would be a convincing thing for the public to hang on to? These like old ladies who had like a choir, a protest choir.
I swear to God, I know those ladies. They are ladies just like that.
Really?
Yeah. You know, they're just singing "We Shall Overcome" and "We Shall Not Be Moved."
Yeah, but they made up a whole song with very specific lyrics.
They didn't make up a whole new song. They took a song and then they just changed the lyrics and they sang it. It's
like Weird Al Yankovic.
Yeah. It's rarely heard except for the people that had like either attended all the hearings and were convinced, including this one Jewish activist who was there thinking he was there supporting France and then kind of comes away with it, realizing, no, this is not the right guy. And other people who've seen the evidence, like his lawyer, that the people who like are the advocates for Diab are people to just say, well, I know him and he wouldn't do this. He doesn't seem like the kind of guy that would have done this in 1980. That's great, but you know, that's not evidence, right? And we see this a lot, and it usually cuts the other way. But
oh yeah. Oh, he stole money from a mosque thing when he was 13. Therefore, he's definitely a murderer.
We're on Adnan Syed all of a sudden, right? Yeah.
So fucked up. Yeah.
Well, he didn't seem like this, or like he would never do that. Well,
yeah.
That's not it. But yeah. It's also hard to have the guy in the room when you're asking everybody, why do you support him? Like, well,
he seems nice.
He seems handsome, and he brought coffee.
Yes. So, Kevin, what did you think about this like structure where the judge gets to do the investigating?
It's so fucking weird in France.
Yeah.
As Lara was saying, in Italy too. It just, I mean, my only experience with this was we did a show called Letitia, which was set in France, and it was a miniseries based on an actual case with the murder of a twin, and they find out later that the other twin had also been molested by the father, whatever. Anyway, in the end, it was one of these judicial, you know, they call him a judge, and they're investigating, and I'm not sure, because then they go to trial, and there's another judicial panel. I just, maybe it's just a misnomer or whatever. They should just call them investigators or whatever. But it reminded me of like these special counsels in the U.S., but like one that gets replaced every 10 years. The first judge cycles out, and that all that time, like they're able to get, the extradition, but they can't like bring him to trial. So no one should be surprised when like another set of eyes comes in and like, there's nothing here.
Yeah.
But it reminded me of all these parallels to the Amanda Knox case. And I don't know if you guys got it. It's like the evidence is pretty weak and it's disputed. You've got this Eurocentric judicial structure and then conviction and then an exoneration and they get to leave. But then the state gets to appeal the exoneration. And, he's essentially today he's a fugitive because he was tried in absentia. He's got an international arrest warrant and, the future doesn't look good for him.
Yeah. You know what else is weird about France? And I'm sorry to any French who are listening to this. That the president of France is married to someone who was his teacher.
Yeah.
Like, that's weird. She's 25 years older than him, and she taught him when he was like 15 years old.
Taught him a lot.
Yeah. Anyway, I'm just saying. That's so I whenever someone says like something's weird about France, I'm like, no, that's not weird about France. This is what's weird about France, in my opinion.
What about the French president at his funeral that both his wife and his mistress attended?
Oh, yeah, that guy. And
it was Francois Mitterrand.
His wife had to go to the hospital and put herself out in a coma because she like was so unhappy or whatever. Remember that? Anyway. Yes, France.
Love you, France.
Let's go to France. I really want to go to France.
I like France.
I know. I hear France is lovely.
10 out of 10 would recommend.
Yeah. So, Toby, you have an interesting comment that I'm so glad you made a note about because it really stuck out to me in the podcast.
It's about going to Syracuse?
No, but we will talk about that because how bad could he be, right?
Right, exactly. He's an Orangeman.
So the judge who first investigated this case, which is what led to him being like extradited to France, later says in the podcast that he was never really after Hassan at all, but a whole other group of people.
On the stand, Mark Trevidick said his primary target had been a Palestinian man named Salim Abu Salim, apparently the leader of the group who carried out the attack in 1980.
My main purpose was to have enough evidence against Salim Abu Salim. I prefer to catch the chief than the mouse.
Better to catch the chief than the mouse.
Did that like perk up your ears a little bit like it did mine?
It kind of comes up and they don't really, there's no real follow up. And I couldn't tell, like, so did you guys know this the whole time? And it just didn't really fit in very well with the story to make it that complicated. In which case, why did you put this in? Or wouldn't you be surprised? Like, I'd be surprised if I was covering this story. And then at the very end, the guy's like, well, I wasn't really too concerned with that guy. I was after this other guy. I've been like, what the hell are you talking about? Like, this is the first I've heard of this. So it kind of got dropped in there and just left there. And then you don't get any, like, do they even give you like 2 sentences on who this sheikh is, who supposedly they're really after, or what his connection could be or whatever? It's just like they dropped this name of this guy who this prosecuting judge was actually after. And for some reason, Hassan was like a way of accessing this guy, maybe. It was very strange. And so, again, it's just kind of left hanging. But it seems like there's like this whole other story that's associated with this that is barely even teased. It's just kind of mentioned.
Yeah.
But maybe that's in season 2.
Despite Diab's affect and the way he talks and he's fuzzy and everything, it seems clear to me that there is no evidence pointing him to this. It turns out the fingerprints don't match. Like, they lied about not having fingerprints. It turns out they did have fingerprints on both the hotel thing that this person wrote on and at the scene of the crime, and they don't match him. Turns out looks like it was somewhere else at the time, etc. So at the time, his release in France is hailed, right, as this heroic thing. But we have had a political wind change since then. And in an act of what I have come to realize is like an anticipatory obedience situation, or just like a capitulation to politics situation, Kevin, attitudes towards Diab seem to have changed a little bit, right?
Yeah, because after they dropped the charges in France, like he returns as like this national hero, right? That like everyone, great injustice reversed and Even the Prime Minister Justin Trudeau is making comments about like it never should have happened to him. And then like within like weeks of this podcast going on, starting, Hassan Diab like gets back on the radar of right-wing media, and they're like going to the college where he works and harassing him. And so now, as we know in Canada, like there's going to be a great government political shift towards the right. Like Trudeau is silent. All the people that like previously been advocating for him and saying, this was a miscarriage of justice, they're not saying anything. And I'm sure that France, after trying him and convicting him in absentia, I think a lot of us were like, okay, that's a bullshit thing. We know that France hasn't requested the extradition yet to get turned down, but I'm sure they are just going to wait until after the new elections and there's a new Canadian government before requesting extradition again. And the handwriting's on the wall that another change in fortune is on the way for Hassan Diab.
So one thing I just wanted to mention that I noticed about the podcast stylistically, and Kevin, I don't know if you picked up on this or not because you typically notice music also. The beginning of the podcast where they're talking about all this terrorist cell stuff or whatever, the music is like chaotic jazz, like in Homeland. Did you notice that?
No.
It's really interesting stylistically. And then it switches and sounds like Hunting Warhead, like a much more techno-driven soundscape. I actually am very curious about the thinking there, and that's something that I would love to know if I ever get to talk to a producer of this show.
Now streaming on Hulu.
It's a serial killer case.
He's the Dahmer you've never heard of.
I definitely felt the presence of evil.
But did he act alone? Now, finally,
Not many people live to tell about their involvement with the serial killer.
the one man who helped break the case.
Never before a face-to-face interview with the camera.
Why now? Let me ask you, what do you think? Am I the evil culprit, the accomplice? I'd like to know how the audience views me.
The Fox Hollow Murders, playground of a serial killer. Now streaming on Hulu.
You may want to consider shopping through Instacart this winter if you like watching snow more than walking in it. Celebrate soup season or own several pairs of fuzzy socks because staying home means staying warm. And some days just scream delivery. So this season, get everything you need right from the comfort of your robe. Download the Instacart app and get delivery in as fast as 30 minutes. Plus, enjoy $0 delivery fees on your first 3 orders. Service fees, exclusions, and terms apply.
All right, let's do what we do. Let's let our listeners know, should they check out The Copernic Affair? Laura Bricker, what do you think? Thumbs up or thumbs down for this podcast?
Yeah, I'm going to go with a mild thumbs up for this. I thought this was extremely well researched and reported. We had hosts that, very experienced. We have a UK journalist and a podcaster. They both specialize in telling stories from the Middle East. They were very detailed in their reporting. They had access to some of the key players in this case, including the accused and also the judge in this case. I think for me, this definitely got some of my justice hackles up because the French justice system kind of made me wild listening to this in terms of the things that they were able to do in this case and the way that this case has continued for as many years on what I'm going to just say is pretty slim, if non-existent evidence. So I'm going to go mild thumbs up, not full thumbs up, because for me, there were parts that were a little bit slow because it was so detailed. But overall, I thought it was really interesting.
Toby Ball, thumbs up or thumbs down for The Copernic Affair?
Yeah, I think I'm like a mild thumbs up as well. I agree with all the stuff that Laura said. I sort of feel like people who are suspected of being terrorists in our country don't get treated much better than this guy Hassan does. But what's weird about this, it's really well reported. It's like having a newspaper article read to you in a lot of ways, I thought. I mean, I don't think it really takes advantage of podcasting as a medium very much. I don't think there's a whole lot of thought put into how to make the best possible podcast about this stuff. It's more sort of how do we just get this information across in a way that's not just purely like reading an article. So, it's hard to give it like a resounding thumbs up based on that, but I think the actual content is pretty strong. Anyway, mild thumbs up. If I was going on a drive or something, I would definitely listen to it because it keeps, but it's not like, it's nothing I would point to as a make a podcast this way type of thing.
Kevin Flynn.
I'm a thumbs up. I thought this was a very good podcast. The investigation was solid. Good work, I think, by these hosts. I do appreciate the care that they took in crafting their investigation, where they went as far as the different people and voices they were able to get. And most importantly, they were able to get Hassan Diab, and the guy's kind of an enigma. And so while it would be a lot easier to kind of narratively present a more colorful person, he's a little frustrating. But I do think that they captured that. And where this legal issue turned on, what the big twists and turns were. I do appreciate podcasts that invest a lot in the journalism, but also do a good job sort of bringing the personalities to life. And that's what I got out of the Copernic Affair.
Yeah, I'm a thumbs up too. I'm not as strong as you, Kevin, but I'm giving it a thumbs up. It's a well executed, well done podcast, but it is missing this one essential piece for me, which is we had a anti-Semitic attack that took place in 1980. Then this dude was really looked at for it in a post 9/11 world. And here we are telling the story in 2025 where the rise of the right and extreme feelings around people on both sides of this story, honestly, I think it would play out very differently today. So we're sort of where it sits right now is actually quite interesting given where we are right now. And there's kind of a bit of why we're telling this story context missing. I'm not saying it's not an interesting story in and of itself, but that to me was the missing piece. I kept waiting for it to be and this is why this is so weird because, and this is why we should pay attention to this because, and this is the consequence of this that we're still feeling today. And that just wasn't there. That being said, the two reporters at the heart of this are very, very good. It sounds pretty good and it's like a smoothly made show. So I can't give it a thumbs down. So yeah, thumbs up for me for the Copernic Affair. All right, Laura Bricker, before we end the show, question for you. Do we have a cat of the week this week?
We have 2 cats of the week this week. I'm very excited about this. They come to us from Helen Yan. Helen says, I would love to nominate my cats. They are unique because we got them a year apart and they have matching missing eyes.
What?
Matching missing eyes.
Matching missing eyes. We got Leela in 2023 and she's been the best one-eyed kitty. She's a Duluth Calico. And last November, I was scrolling our local rescues Facebook page and spotted another one-eyed Duluth Calico. And this one's called Galatea in the background in one of their recent transport posts. I stalked their site until she showed up for adoption. We applied to meet her. So now Galatea and Leela are one-eyed sisters.
Incredible.
They're adorable, and I'd love to send you a picture. So then she said, love the show, and sent some pictures of the cats.
All right, Laura Bricker. Of course, people can email us if they want to submit their pets or any animal to be cat of the week, just crimewriterson@gmail.com, or they can put it in our Facebook group. But if folks want to reach out to you directly, maybe find you on the internet and pitch you, how can you be found there?
You can find me at Laura Bricker on Instagram and Blue Sky. And she found me on Instagram and DM'd me and sent me these cats. So I'm there.
Toby Ball, what about you? If people want to find you, talk about your other work besides what you're doing on Crime Writers, how can they find you online?
At Toby Ball NH on Blue Sky.
What about you, Kevin?
I'm at Kevin P. Flynn.
You can follow me everywhere at Reb Lavoie. I'm on Instagram, I'm on Blue Sky, and yeah, I'm still on Twitter for reasons. I encourage you, though, to join our incredible community and our amazing Crime Writers on Facebook discussion group. A couple thousand of the coolest people you will ever talk to in your life. Get episodes early and ad-free and all the other awesome stuff we make for members of our Patreon at patreon.com/partnersincrimemedia. Our theme song is by Ty Gibbons, composed and performed. Our editor is the wonderful Livy Burdett. The EP of this show is Kevin. This show was recorded in Studio C, the closet in our New Hampshire basement, where we also have small groups of old Canadian hippies singing their support for us by customizing the lyrics to beatnik folk songs.
Rebecca, row your boat ashore.
On behalf of all the crime writers, thanks so much for listening. We will catch you later. In October of 1980, a motorcycle packed with explosives went off outside
Maybe not so happy?
Yeah, I know. I just heard myself. A motorcycle with explosives. All right.
And everybody died.
Waka, 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 waka.